All right, so welcome everyone. My name is Alex Johnson Jimenez. I'm one of the digital learning coaches here at the CREC. And today's presentation is going to be, this tech bit is going to be on conditional formatting. Let me go ahead and present my screen for you so that you can see what our objectives are. And I got a few things that I want to be able to share with you as well. So let me move this over here and go into present mode. Okay, can everyone see that okay? All right, beautiful. So let's go ahead and get started. Like I said, this is actually going to be an interactive kind of presentation, meaning that I'm going to follow the process in the classroom where it's I will do something and then I will give it over to you for you to practice right away so that I can actually use that skill at that time. So like I said, I'm one of the digital learning coaches. These are my colleagues in the CREC team. Joel Leba is our IT specialist, and Hector Valles is our other digital learning coach. Today's objectives, we are going to cover quite a bit, but there's going to be time for you to actually try and do some of these things so that if you run into an error or an issue of some sort, I'm available to help you out right on the spot. Okay. So I'm going to introduce conditional formatting, what it is. I'm going to give you some before and after examples. Now, full disclosure, when I show you the after, it is going to include quite a bit of the other things that I'd like to cover, including VLOOKUP, conditional formatting, some formulas, query formulas, and things of that nature, because I want to show you what Google Sheets and Excel by extension are really capable of. It's not just a place for you to just collect data and look at it and then try to hunt for specific things. There's a lot you can do. So the after examples I'm going to show you do include quite a few of the things that I will be covering in future tech bits as well. I will show you how to access and manage conditional formatting. And then I will give you a template that it's exactly the same template that I will be using so that you can open it up and you can follow along and practice and make mistakes and, you know, find some ahas and whatnot so that you feel comfortable with what we're doing. I know that going to trainings, somebody basically lectures the entire time, and then I try to do it myself and have to go back and try to figure out what they did. So I want to give you that opportunity to practice what we're learning. So we will practice doing conditional formatting for just one column, for multiple columns, and then a little bit more advanced if time permits. And that's what we're going to be using. If I check a box, the whole row will turn a specific color, or it'll strike through or underline it, whatever we want. So that's a little bit more advanced just because it uses a formula, but I will walk you through all those processes. And then our closing. And our closing simply is for you to take attendance and give any feedback. I'm always looking for ways to improve and make things better for you and for our colleagues around the state. And if you want some additional support, I'm happy to do that with you. So if you have a team that you're working on and you got a project that you're working on and you want to know how you can make your data analysis and evaluation and whatnot, or collection even with Google Forms more efficient, all you need to do is just let me know and I'll be happy to sit with you or your team and we'll figure out what you're trying to accomplish and see how we can make that happen. I won't do it for you. I will walk you through it. I will do some examples because I think that building that capacity in each of us is really critical. Does anyone have any pressing questions before we get started? Okay. So a few things I'm also going to be sharing with you is we have a Jamboard. So if you have questions that you don't want to ask out loud, you will have this Jamboard right here to be able to ask questions. If you've not used a Jamboard before, this is what it's going to look like. On the left-hand side, there's a little sticky note. It's the fourth one from the left. Simply click on it, type in your statement, hit save, and it'll pop up over here and you can drag it and change it as necessary. The second slide in this Jamboard is for you to think about as you're going through this, how could you use this in the work that you're doing? How could it make your work a little bit more efficient and easy? So again, just creating little sticky notes by clicking right here, adding it, and then dragging it over one of these. And you see some of these that have extensions right here. So maybe somebody puts an idea on this one, and then somebody else has another idea of how to maybe extend that. So this is a great way for you to support each other with your work as well, okay? So I'm gonna go ahead and pop that into the chat. Let me see, so that you can open it up and have that open. I am going to, so this is the sheet that we will be working with. We will be doing some work with classrooms because I know we have folks who work directly with students and teachers. And then I'm going to do an example that is strictly for the business side. For perhaps, Carol, if you're here, this is for you. This is the travel reimbursements and how this might actually work with you a little bit better, okay? So having said that, I want to give you the sheet. It's going to look like this. When you click on the link, it'll ask you to make a copy. Go ahead and make a copy. You can open that up. Okay. And if everyone has that copy or you just want to just follow along on the screen, that's perfectly fine. Do I have anybody who's having issues with either the Jamboard or the spreadsheet? Are everybody good? All right, so let's go ahead and get started then so we can finish on time. So let me show you some before and afters, okay? So the one that you're looking on the screen right now could be very typically a way that a teacher is collecting their data. They have a spreadsheet that they created. They have the student names or grade levels. The students have taken tests. The teachers assigning them grades based on their tests, based on the range over here, another test, another grade. And maybe you remember this from when you were in school, but sometimes teachers would, if you didn't do so well on a test or whatnot, they would send a note home that you had to have your family sign and then bring back and whatnot. And some teachers still do that, right? And so, but this is just an example of how that might work with conditional formatting to make things easier, because otherwise, as you remember, a teacher might be highlighting on a piece of paper or whatever the case might be. And in this case, they're just checking a box. So this is what it could look like before. This is what could look like after. Okay, so once we begin doing conditional formatting, we begin adding some more formulas, some charts and whatnot. All of a sudden, the data becomes much more dynamic, much easier to understand, much easier to see. And you're not like hunting for specific scores or specific students. And you can really talk about the data very easily using a lot of the things that Google Sheets is able to provide. So for example, by clicking right here, I can highlight this entire so that I know right away. Over here, you see Lola and Javon are green because they're duplicates. So it's an easy way for you to be able to find duplicates within names and scores and whatnot. The grades are color-coded. The ranges are color-coded. These grades are actually assigned automatically. So if I go in here and I change this to, say, 75, well, we know that 75 should be right around a C. So if I click on this to say 75, it automatically changes the grade for that individual and it tabulates it. So these are being tabulated right now. So as these grades change, let's make this a student an 88. We should see that go up to 10. And there it is. So this changes automatically. The percent change is also kind of a nice way for you to take a look at whether or not the data, the work that you're doing is making any difference. So in this case, we see that we had a drop in 44%, which is actually good because we're talking that we got 25 students with an F on the first test and they went to 14 on the second test. So something happened, right? So this is a good way for you to begin looking at your data to see there's a percent change over time, given the instruction or the material that you're trying to cover and so forth. And at the same time, you'll notice that the charts also change. So some people like to look at the data in this format in the table, and some people like to look at in this format. So let's make this student here who got a D, and we'll see the D's right here. It's 13. Let's give him 75, and you see that the charts just automatically change because we've made them dynamic. So like I said, some of these things that I'm showing you right now are a little bit more advanced, but there are things that I will be covering in subsequent tech bits. Here's one of my favorites, because one of the things that I really like to do is be able to contact the family and or whatever the case might be. So you notice that each of the students has an email address right here. But check this out. So if I type in, let's say Vincent right here, his family's email is family73@email.com, right? So if I go down here and I type in Vincent, the email automatically populates because I already have it stored someplace else, and I can show you how to do that. But you also notice that his name became green because now the formula says, hey, we have a duplicate Vincent. So maybe he took the test twice or whatever the case might be. Okay, so a lot of these things, like I said, we'll cover subsequent things. This is also one of those situations where this data may be kind of overwhelming because I have so much of it. I have 84, I have my 6th graders, my 7th graders, all included in here. What if I wanted to separate it out by grade level? Okay, or if you're working with the school and you're working with multiple schools, here's looking at you, Allison, you're working with multiple schools and you want to separate your data by the school so you can keep track of what you're doing and whom you're working with. Well, here's what we got. We write a formula in this cell. It goes to this tab and it extracts all my 6th graders and brings in all their data to one place, including the percent change for the students as well. And it's dynamic. So any changes I make to this are automatically populated on here if they're 6th grade students. Okay, let me stop right there. Does anybody have any questions?
Yes, I have a question about this piece specifically here. So if you went over to classroom example 2 and you did a filter for 6th grade and copied that into a 3rd tab at the bottom, you might get the data, but would you get the formula transferring to that 3rd tab as well? Is that another way you could do it too?
So you could do it a couple of different ways, and I'll be happy to talk with you specifically about that. But what ends up happening is that this formula right here, what it's basically doing is says, take a look at that tab and select all the columns where C equals 6th grade. So if I change this to 7th, it'll automatically change this to 7th grade and bring in those students. And then I could basically, all I need to do is duplicate this, change 6th to 7th, and I got the same data for my 7th graders automatically populating.
That's very cool.
And since it's dynamic, remember Vincent down here? If we look down here, we won't see Vincent, but the moment that I put 6th grade in here, and let's give him a couple of scores, 87 and I don't know, 59. If I go right here, he automatically shows up because it is dynamic. So any changes made basically to the master are populated then to the subsequent data tables. Okay. Any other questions? So this is what it could look like in a school setting, right? With teachers and their students. But like I said, this could also work completely in the same format if you are collecting data for the people that you're working with teachers or, you know, even your colleagues here in the office. It's the CREC and how you're collecting your data. So you can begin to think about how much that might look. So specifically, this is what it might look like in the office for Carol, who Hector and I have been working with on travel reimbursement. She might be collecting this information right here. You know, the traveler, the start and end dates, and the way it's done, this all calculates how many hours actually pass between the 2 days of travel, whether they qualify for $59 reimbursement or not, whether their reimbursement was approved, they need more information, does not qualify, etc. And maybe she clicks on here to say that she completed that reimbursement form. This is what it could look like, right? But here's what it could look like when you use conditional formatting, formulas, and things of that nature. What you notice here is that, and these are dropdowns, so you can choose, and by color coding them, you have a better idea of what it is that you're looking for right away. And so we can add filters to this as well. But this is automatically calculating the number of hours, and then this is automatically calculating how many full 24-hour periods take place between the travel days, as an example. Now, what you'll notice here is that Vincent is highlighted yellow because there are 2 submissions for it. So it's very possible that Vincent submitted 2 accidentally, and the formula here will go ahead and find that there's a duplicate. Okay, but check this out. If I do Vincent again, and I do 2023, I'm gonna say 8:30. Why is his not highlighted?
The dates are different.
It's different because it's a different date. So the formula that works for this particular section only highlights it if all the data in the row is identical.
That's going to really help with my travel tracker, because we had a duplicate yesterday that I caught, but I didn't have this in place. I caught it with Tasha, and we're able to pull the duplicate out.
Yeah, so if you look at it this way, right? I mean, when you got, this is only 12, right?
Right.
But if you got 30 or 40
or 300
or 300, you are going like line by line trying to find where those things are. And this is a great way to catch them right away, then cross-reference to see if it is in fact what you want, if it is in fact a duplicate or not.
This is awesome.
This is so awesome.
So,
you've just solved for me, because what I'll usually do with my data set is I will filter out for duplicates, but every single field needs to be the same match.
Yes, this will help with stipends also, Holly.
Right? Exactly.
With the stipends, yeah.
And so it's
awesome.
Really a really great way. And like I said, if you have a spreadsheet that you're working with, and then you tell me what it is that you want to accomplish, I am more than happy to sit with you and figure out how to make this happen. Absolutely, absolutely.
Great, because I know I'm going to need some more coaching on this. So that's awesome. Thank you.
So this, like I said, this includes things that we're not covering today, but I want to give you the the opportunity to see what we can do. And there's so much more that we can do, but so I'm going to be covering today conditional formatting, which is basically the coloring, right? The coloring of cells, or bolding the cells, or strike throughs or underlines based on the criteria that you provide. And then in subsequent ones, we'll talk about the formulas. How do we get that information out into separate tabs? How do we find the duplicates in a more complex manner? And there's just so much more that we can do. But I want to show you a couple more things real quickly before we start then. Here's the new feature in Google Sheets. It's a timeline feature. So I can take my data that has dates specifically, dates and all this information. I click right here and check this out. Let me make this a little bit bigger so you can see it. Let's do 125. This actually provides a timeline of when people are traveling, when they've traveled. And see here, the color is also there because we have a duplicate. But I can go ahead and, for example, for Tawana, I can click right here and it opens up all her specific information on the side. So this is a kind of a neat feature for taking a look at timelines and when people are traveling, who traveled when and where, and so forth.
It'll help the supervisors as well as they're approving travel for their coaches.
They can visualize, right? So
yes.
The thing is right here, this is kind of hard to see. Sometimes you end up having to open up a calendar in order to really see what's actually happening. But with the timeline, you have a better idea of when those travel situations are occurring. And Carol, so we can remember how we extracted the 6th graders from the classroom. We can extract people by their departments. So if you wanted to take a look at their the departments, so Hector and I are the DLCs, right? So this is why we said DLC here. We went ahead and extracted Alex and Hector from all those. So if you had 300, you could find how often are the DLCs traveling and what their reimbursement might look like and things of that nature. So it's a great way to keep track of departments separate from the master sheet. All right, you ready to learn a little conditional formatting then?
Yes.
Yes. I have a
Alright.
quick question. I probably have the answer in the question, but I'm going to go ahead and ask it anyway. So you have more than one Vincent, would you just simply identify them as Vincent A and Vincent B?
Yes.
Yeah, okay.
But here's the thing. You're absolutely correct. I mean, you would have a first and last name here, right? So
Okay.
you have a first and last name, but this is only going to find an exact match. So Vincent right here left on 4/4/23 at 2 p.m. And the reason that this was highlighted is because it's exactly the same. It is exactly the same. So it's not just looking for the name, but it's also looking for the date and time that they left.
Okay.
So that's why these two are highlighted. And this is why this formula is more complicated than the one that we're going to learn today for identifying just duplicates just by a single piece of criteria, which is going to be the name.
Okay.
Okay. And last but not least, I included the formulas that we'll cover today, if time permits, right here on the very last tab. And so that you can use them with some samples and whatnot, but I will show you exactly what they look like in practice. So let's go ahead and get started. Okay, so let's go ahead and get started right here. I'm going to show you first how to access conditional formatting and what the menu looks like and what the features mean, because we're going to format this page right here to make it look a little bit more like this one right here. Okay, so to get to conditional formatting, we're going to go up to Format and Conditional Formatting.
Can we copy your steps with the template you shared with us?
That template is completely yours to do what you need to do to practice as we go along, what have you. I'm just going to show you. So I would open it up just so you become familiar. And then as I'm doing the actual steps for creating the format, you can do it as well. So you can see how it all works.
Alex,
Awesome.
can you drop it again in the chat for me, please?
You got it. Give me one
Thanks.
sec. Grab the.
Yeah, I'm going to shadow your steps with you so I get it in real time here.
Okay, let me grab the right here and I'll put it in the chat.
That sounded like Katrina. Hi, Katrina.
Hi, everyone. Sorry, it's a little late. I was in a coaching meeting.
Of course, no worries. Okay, so everyone should have a copy of this now. Feel free to shadow, ask questions at any time, please. This is, this is for you. If you want to jump in and ask a question, please do so. Don't type it in the chat because I'm having a hard time keeping track of the chat because I need the full screen for this to just jump right in, or put it on the Jamboard if that's more comfortable for you as well. Okay, so let's go ahead and get started. So I'm on tab Classroom Example 1. This is the tab. This is my blank. I'm going to go up to Format and Conditional Formatting. Now, we talk about formatting. You're probably very familiar. If I go right down here, you see the bold, the italicized, underline, strike through, change the text color, change the background color. That's what we talk about when we're really discussing formatting. So when you open up conditional formatting, this pane is going to show up on the right-hand side. Okay, so let me explain what you're going to see here. And don't worry about color scale. That's something a little bit different, but we're going to focus on single color today. Apply to range. So you see H7 right here, and yours may be different, but the reason it's H7 is because you see the cell is H7. That is the cell that I have clicked on. And so this is what it automatically brings in. So whatever cell you click on and then you open conditional formatting, it's always going to populate right there. Okay. Next, I'm going to try something. I'm going to show you something a little bit different. Let me click on cell C1 and I'll show you what I'm talking about. Okay, so you see cell C2 now because I clicked in cell C2. Okay, and then the format rules is the next step. So the first part is, what do you want me to apply this conditional formatting to? What range? What cells? That's what we're talking about, that first step right there. The next says, okay, so here are the cells you want me to do something with. Now, what do you want me to do? And by default, and so I'm going to say this again, by default, it always defaults to format cell if is not empty, if the cell is not empty. Okay, by default, it's always going to be is not empty. Okay, so this is the rule. Now, how do you want me to format if it's not empty? I want you to make it green because by default, it's always set to green. This is the reason that my cell C2 here is green because it's not empty. And so by default, I'm going to color it green. Does that make sense to everyone?
Totally.
Okay, basic default. So here's how I can change that. I can simply go down to the color and change it to yellow. Automatically changes it to yellow. I can change the font color to, I don't know, purple. Well, it's kind of hard to see. Red, there it is. I can strike through. I can underline it. I can italicize it. I can bold it. I can do all of these things just to grab my attention to that specific cell. Okay. Now let's go back up to the rules so that you see what the rules are. Okay, so format cell is if, by default it's empty, is not empty, but here are all the things. Text contains. So if a text, if you're looking for a specific letter combination, LY, for example, you could do that. You're looking for specific text that begins with ST, you can do that. Text ends with, text is exactly, and this is the one that we're going to be using in just a moment. So this is telling Google Sheets, I want you to look in this column, in this cell, in this range, and find if the text is exactly this, then I want you to color code it this or whatever it is that we decide to do. Okay, and I'll walk you through that in a second. But it doesn't have to be just text. It can also be a date is something very specific. You're looking for something very specific for all occurrences of April 11th, 2023, or for Carol, for you, it could be any travel date before 4/25, whatever.
Well, because with the advanced travel reimbursements, we can only generate those 10 days prior to their travel, so we could flag something like that.
Yeah, absolutely. So you can really highlight those travel advancements just by selecting this in a specific color or kind of any kind of format that you recognize. When we get to numbers, so we got basically text up here. This is dates, and then we get to the numbers. And we'll be doing that when we do the second part of highlighting the students' grades in the second. But here we have greater than or equal to, less than, et cetera, is between this grade and this grade, or this value and this value is less than this value, or it's equal to this value. All these things we can program in to really extract the data and make it visually pop out, because that's what you're looking for. That's what's important to you. And last but not least is the formulas. And that's the last thing we'll touch on today once we get to that. Okay. Does anyone have any questions before we begin? Okay, so that was the overview of the management. I hope that made sense. If not, please ask right now before we continue, because then we're going to just kind of go at a nice little steady pace. No? Okay. All right, I'm going to close this for a second. And before we begin, there's a couple of things that you need to know about when we start doing cells. Right now, I have cell C2, so that would be written as just C2, okay? That's the reference for this particular cell, C2. And in the upper left-hand corner up here, you see that is C2. If I selected multiple cells, now we have a range. And so if I selected this, click and hold, and I drag down, this is going to be written as C2 colon C8. And that's very important. That colon tells Google Sheets that I'm working with a range, a combination, a string of different cells. So in this case, I'm telling Google Sheets I've selected these cells, and this is how I reference that. That's really important to know. Okay, in the upper left-hand corner, you'll also see C2 colon C8. That means I've selected that range of cells. So when I go to begin adding my conditional formatting, I want to add it to a range of cells, not just one cell, but a range of cells. So we always want to make sure that we have that colon in there. Okay. Any questions about that?
Quick question, because I think I misunderstood. So are we putting, if we want to identify C2 through C8, we would put that formula C2 colon C8 in the cell on the right side of the margin indicated for apply to range? Is that where we would put that?
Would, if you wanted to make it harder on yourself. But you would, but honestly, you would if you wanted to do it the long way. But that is exactly how you would do it, Holly, if you also wanted to change it because you made a mistake in selecting the cells. So let me explain.
Okay.
So let's go and get started. So the easiest way for me, if I'm doing this, I want to select as many cells as possible because I know I'm going to be adding more data, right? So instead of selecting cell B2, because we're going to do the grades right now, instead of selecting B2 and dragging down until I get to here, right? And it should be B2 to B83, which it is right there. What if I add Vincent down below? He's not going to get formatted because my range stops at C84 or B84, right? So instead, what I like to do, or what my preference is, if you click on the column heading B, it selects it all. Okay, it selects everything. So go ahead and do that. Click on column B and you'll see it all highlighted. And if you scroll down, it's going to continue all the way down to, I think, 1,000. Okay, once that's selected, we're now going to go ahead and begin formatting this. I want to be able to see my 6th graders differentiated from my 7th graders, differentiated from my 8th graders. So once this is selected, I click on Format, Conditional Formatting. Do you see that, Holly? Apply to range.
I see it on yours, but I don't see it on mine that I'm practicing with. It just says B, it says B2. Let me try it again. Maybe I missed a step.
Okay. Click on Cancel. And then select to just click on the column, just on B on the column.
Okay. All right, I did that. And then go to Format. Go to Conditional Formatting. Okay. Yeah, it didn't on my practice sheet. It still just says B2. It doesn't say B1 colon B1000.
So if you encounter that error, go ahead and type it in. Type in B1.
Okay. Yeah.
B1000.
Just go ahead and type it in.
Holly, this is Emily. What I did was I had to close out the conditional format rules because it was holding on to that. So I closed it out. And then when I went to formatting, then it did it.
Okay, perfect.
Okay.
Thank you for that.
Thank you. Okay, let me try that. I think that might have. Yep, that's exactly what I needed to do. Thank you, sister.
Thank you. Okay, so we have B1 to B1000 highlighted. We see everything is in green because by default, we're looking at is not empty and it's always green, right? We know that already. Okay, so here's what we're going to do. Where it says format cells if, I'm going to click on the down arrow. I'm going to type in, excuse me, I'm going to select text is exactly. And as soon as I do that, I see a value or formula, a little box show up right there. Here, I'm going to type in 6th. 6th. Notice what happened right away.
Yes.
Okay. Right away, it looks it and it's instant. And that's the beautiful thing. This is a great way for you to be able to see if what you're doing is actually what you want to accomplish. So let's change that color to a light blue. Okay, so here's the next step. I want to do it for my 7th grader, right? Well, instead of clicking done, don't click done, because if you're done, you're going to have to repeat this all over. Instead, what I do is add another rule. And the reason I'm going to do that is because Google Sheets knows that I'm going to add something very similar, or it thinks I'm going to add something similar. So it's going to basically copy everything I just did to another rule. And then I can just change my parameters. So if I click on add another rule, you see it's exactly the same. But now I'm going to just go in and change the 6 to 7. And we're going to change that color to, say, a light green. Maybe a darker green, because that's kind of hard to see. So what would you do to do your 8th grade?
Add another rule and then plug in 8.
That's right. So click on add another rule. And then change that 7th to 8th. And then change your color. But this time, change it to like a yellow, but make it bold.
Bold.
You see how that affects it right away?
That's so cool.
Okay. And so this takes us to the end of our first part, which is conditional formatting for one column, just one column. And if I click done, here are my rules. My rules show up right there. Okay. So if I wanted to go back and change the color for my 6th grade, all I would do is click on that rule and change the color. Let's say red, and it changes it right away. And then I can click done if I wanted to. And it goes right back here. Okay. One thing I want to draw your attention to is which rule did we do first? We did
The 6th grade.
we did the 6th grade first, then we did the 7th, then they did with the 8th, right? And the reason that's really important, is because when I'm moving through here and I'm creating more conditional formattings for different values and different things, they're going to show up on this list in the order that I put them in. And that's very important because the last rule you create is the last rule that's applied. Okay. But if there's a rule before it that contradicts what I just did, the last rule will not be applied. Okay. And I'll explain that once we get to doing the whole row in just a bit. Okay. So we're good with that. Does anybody have any questions about single column formatting? All right, let's go ahead and close this out. So click on the X right here, just so we're all on the same page. Now we're going to format multiple columns. We're going to do the test scores because the test scores are given in the same range, meaning that we don't have like one test is graded as, you know, a rubric of 1 to 4 and the other one is rated by percentage. If that was the case, I wouldn't be able to do what I'm doing right now. But since both of them are graded or scored on a percentage scale, which we see on the right-hand side right here, then I can apply the conditional formatting to all of it. So instead of doing it for just this column and then repeating the same thing for this column, why not do both at the same time, right? And save some trouble. Okay. So the problem is that we have one column in between, right? So here's how we get around that. Honestly, though, you can't, because I'm going to be doing values and not letters. I can get away with selecting all the columns, but I'm not going to do that because I want to show you just a little something more advanced right here. So here's what you're going to do. If you're on a Mac, you're going to use the command option. If you're on a PC, I believe that's the Alt, right? Right next to the space bar.
I want to be on a Mac.
I know.
No.
Computer at home, so don't tell anybody.
No one's on Max, Alex.
Errol, I'm hitting you up.
So what I want to do is select column C and column E. The problem is that most of us know that if I hold the Shift key down, I can select multiple things, right? So if I click if I click here and then I hold the Shift key and then go to E, it selects D as well. I don't want D, I just want C and E. So here's how we do that. Click on C, hold the Alt key down. And if this doesn't work at the PC, I'm sorry, I'll figure it out then. But then all I'm going to do is by holding the Alt key down or the Command key on the Mac, click on E, and I'll just have these two selected.
It's the Control key.
The Control, thank you, the Control key. So if you click on C, hold the key down, and then E, you should just have these two selected. Now that they're both selected, go to Format, Conditional Formatting, and take a look at the range to apply.
Mhm.
C1 to C1000, comma, just like when we send multiple emails, you got to separate the emails with a comma. It's exactly the same. We want to separate the ranges with a comma.
Okay.
I have a question.
Go for
Does
it.
it matter which one's first? Because mine shows E first and not C. Does it matter which one?
It does not.
Okay, I
And
just
so
want to
does
make sure,
mine.
because if I screw it up, I could screw it up anything, so I just have to make sure.
It won't matter because this is being applied to these two ranges. It doesn't matter which order it is.
Is it because they clicked on it first?
It's
Yes.
probably because they clicked on it first, right?
Okay.
Okay.
Yeah, it's a 100% the reason. Okay, so we got these two ranges selected. Now I'm going to do ranges. Okay, so I want to see, so I'm going to go to is not empty. Now we're going to go down to the ones that do values, the greater than and all this down here. I want to do less than or equal to 60. And you automatically see these being selected in both columns. Okay. I'm going to change the color to a light red. These are my students who scored less than 60% on this quiz or these two tests. So how do I do the next range? What would I do from here?
Add another rule.
There you go. Add another rule, copies everything over, including the rule itself. But now I want the middle part, the between, right? So I'm going to go to right here where it says format cells is, where my rules are. And I want to do is between. And so now you see there's an and here because there are two, right? Because I want to be able to put two values. So I'm going to do 61 to 75. And I want to change that color to a light yellow. So now I have my students who got less than 60 are light red. Students who score between 61 and 75 are yellow. And of course, you can do that differently, right? If you wanted to break it down by like F's, D's, and C's and so forth, you can take a look at the ranges and you can color code them that way accordingly as well. I just want to show you just very briefly how you can do that. But again, with your data, whatever data might be, if you want to do datas between here and here, I can select those two dates and color code those because they happen between those two dates. And of course, add another rule. And now I want to do greater than. And so because the last one was 61 to 75, what should this number be?
Greater than 75?
Greater than 75.
Yeah.
And we're going to change that to a green color. You can change it to whatever color you want. I'm just telling you what I'm doing.
Holly, if we have to take a test, I'm sitting next to you.
I got you, girl.
So if we go down.
Alex, you better make this open book.
I have to take a test. I'm just gonna leave because I don't need to figure out another thing.
That's funny. So I'm done with those two rows. That's the second objective that we had, was to take a look at how we do it for two rows. We did it for one with the grade. We did it for two with the scores. So I'm going to click done. And here are my three rules that I just created. Okay. And I know somebody's going to say, wait a minute, where are the other rules that we created? Okay, so let me show you how you find those. Click on the extra up here in the corner. Here's how you do that. There's a couple different ways that you can do that. One, I know that this has conditional formatting. So if I click right here and I do conditional formatting, the rules are right there. If I click on C, it shows me the ones for that column. If I click on E, it shows me the ones for that column as well. But how do I see them all? Okay, here's how you see them all. Let me repeat that.
There
You
you
see-
go.
You
Yes.
see this corner right here is
Mhm.
blank. If I click on it, basically what that's saying is select everything to the right and everything down. Okay. select all the column letters and all the column, all the rows. So if I click right there, it shows me all of these right here. Okay. If you look, you'll see that they're now in the same order that we created them. We did these three first, and then we did these three last. Okay.
I'm just curious, Alex, why is it labeled 1, 2, 3?
I'm sorry.
On yeah, what does
Right here. Yeah, it's just the format. By default, this is just telling you that. So for example, you see the 1, 2, 3 right here, it's bold, right? It just shows you what that conditional formatting is. It could be ABC, but for whatever reason, they just did it as 1, 2, 3.
Okay, all right.
Now that we've done that, go down to the very bottom where we see Max is the last student and type in anybody's name. So I'm going to say Bob is a 7th grader. Oops. You see that's green. 99. Now you see the letter because remember, this is the letter grade didn't show up because this is not the one that has the formula in it. This is what the teacher was using manually, right? So they would have to be going back and forth, right? But the color changed because, let me change this to 59. The color changed because we did column C, right? Column C1 to C1000. So it's automatically going to look at that information. But since the teacher doesn't have a formula for the letter grades, they would have to go back up to their range up here, find the grade, and then input it manually here. And that's what we're trying to avoid, is avoid that unnecessary task. Okay. Questions before we move on to the last part? Okay. Does anybody know how to put checkboxes? Okay. Beautiful. Let me show you. I'm going to go ahead and delete this. Here's how you do it. Click in the box right here, clicking G, and you go to Insert, and then down towards the bottom, you see checkbox. And there's your checkbox.
Hey, can you highlight the whole column and do that?
Yep. So here's what you can do with that. Now,
That's
before you
cool.
do that, Holly, if you highlight the whole column, what else is going to get a checkbox? Form
If I
sign.
highlight the whole
The
column?
title,
The
the
title.
title.
Right,
cell.
okay.
Yeah, so that's going to get a whole box, right? So there's a couple ways you can do it. You see the little handle right here? The little
Yes.
circle right there. If I click on it and drag it, actually, if I double click it, let me back up. If it recognizes that there's data over here, if I double click it, it's going to put a checkbox in everything that has data.
Okay.
That's really super, super efficient. If there's not any data though, here's what I can do. I can click on the little handle right there and just drag this straight down. You see the little, I can
Love
go
it.
as far as I want, and then the checkboxes are there. Which is what I would do, because
Yeah.
I know that I'm going to be adding more data, right? And so there's no sense in adding another checkbox here.
That's great.
Here's what you need to be careful though. If I checkbox this right here, what do you suppose is going to happen if I double click here or drag this down?
You're gonna get check boxes all the way down.
Exactly. So be careful that if you're wanting to add more, that you're doing it from a blank one.
A
Okay?
blank checkbox. Okay.
Mhm. Okay, now let's talk about checkboxes for a second.
Alex,
Yes,
can I
please.
interrupt you before you go to checkboxes?
Mhm.
So how would I, because I know the sheet you gave us to practice on doesn't have the letter grades, but when I put in my new student at the bottom and put her in 7th grade, how do I get that 7th grade to, because it doesn't have a rule, it doesn't have the,
So
can I?
when you
What?
added that student, and you put 7th grade, it didn't change color for you?
That's correct, it did not.
Okay. So hold on to that. Hold on to that question. Let me finish this process. We only have about 7 minutes left, and then I can work with you directly with that. Is that okay?
Good. Perfect.
Okay. So the last thing I want to show you then, I mean, there's technically 2 more things. So I'm going to give you a choice what you want to do, what you want to learn. Do you want to learn how to find the duplicates, or do you want to learn how to highlight an entire row if you checkbox? What would be most beneficial to you? I mean, I'm happy to stay later. I just want to honor your time. That's really what it comes down to.
I'm okay with saying for both, but it's, I don't know what everyone else has, but I'm okay with it.
Is one more important than another for people?
Maybe we go with the checkbox.
Okay, so we'll start with the checkbox at 4:30. If you need to leave, please do so. And if you want to stay, I will finish off by showing you the duplicates and then answering that question about why it's not working, okay? So a couple of things that you need to know about the checkboxes. When a checkbox is blank, not checked, I'm gonna draw your attention to this right here. You see where my cursor is right here? This is called the formula bar, and you see false. When a box is not checked, it is by default false. Click on it. You see it's true, okay? So yes, it's basically yes or no, right? It's basically what you're doing is saying, yes, this form has been turned in, or no, it hasn't been turned in. So it's yes and no, true and false. And that's very important when it comes to rules in formulas. So let's do this then. Okay, I want to highlight everything, the whole row, if this box is checked. So here's what I'm going to do. I'm going to click on A and just select everything all the way across. You can do shift if you want to, but I just clicked on A. Let me do it again. Click on A, hold, drag across so that A through F are selected. Okay. Next, I'm going to go to Format, Conditional Formatting. This pops up because I selected everything that has a rule in it, right? I'm going to add a new rule. Okay. This is really good. This is really good because you see that my formula is A1 to F1000, right? Because it's selected from the very beginning to the very end of column F. What you notice is by default, it's not empty and it's highlighted. It's going to be highlighted green. Why are these not highlighted green? Anybody?
We already have a rule.
That's right. There's already a rule being applied to those things. So the last rule can't override the previous rule. It's just the way it works. It just won't override it. Okay. We're going to change the formula, or excuse me, the range, because we want the range to not include the headings. We want it to start where the data actually is, which is A2. So on apply to range, I'm going to click on the right between there, and I'm going to erase the 1 and just put a 2. Make sure you didn't get rid of the colon. So it should say A2 colon F1000. Next, we're going to go to Format. And I'm going to go all the way down to Formula Is. And here's where we're going to add our very first formula. Something to note in Google Sheets and also in Excel, every formula begins with an equal sign. If you do not put an equal sign, it will not work, okay? It all begins with an equal sign. So I'm going to explain what the formula is doing. So I'm going to say equal, Shift 4 for the dollar sign. What column are my checkboxes in?
G.
G, okay. And they begin in G2, right? So I'm going to put G2. Okay. So you see how automatically this is already changed? Okay. And the reason the dollar sign says is there is it's code for Google Sheets to look at the entire column beginning in G2. In the entire column beginning in G2. So what we're saying is, okay, if G2 equals true, if G2 equals true, let's highlight it, this neon ugly green right there. Let's check it. Before I click done, I want to check it. There it is. It worked. Did it work for you?
Yes.
Okay. Now I know that it works. So let's go down and double check though. Did it work down here? Yep, it works there. Does it work right here? Yep, it works right there. What about here? Absolutely. So everywhere that I click and I change this from false to true, it highlights the entire row. Now I'm going to click done. And I'm going to find all my conditional formatting. Okay, so if I click right here, why is this column not turning bright green?
Because it doesn't have a check mark. It's a,
There is, it's right there.
oh, no, but just that row, you mean?
Yep, why are these not?
Because there's a
bright green?
rule.
A
There's
row
the
close.
rules, right?
Rule is at the very bottom, right? So it's
For the
only
true.
applying to the columns that don't have any rules applied to them already. So what do you think I could do to get the whole thing to override all those?
Can you click and drag rules? Can you
That's
click and
exactly
drag
right.
it?
Yeah, that's exactly right. So if you hover over to the left side a little bit, next to the little green box, you'll see it goes from my hand. If you go a little bit further, it turns into a little plus sign. If I click and hold, I drag it all the way to the top. And there you go. It is now the first rule that's being applied to everything. Try it. Any other questions? Does that make sense?
Yes.
So you got a couple ways that you can do this. And one is that you can create the last rule you want first, right? Which sometimes it's hard to think ahead, or create it where last and then just drag it to where you want it to actually supersede all the other rules. Okay, everyone, it is exactly 4:30.
Does that only work with the last?
I'm glad that you asked that. I'm glad that you asked that. It does not work with just the last box. It could be anything in between. So here's an example of that. But before I do that, it is 4:30 and I want to honor your time. And I'm really very grateful for those of you who are here to take a look at this. I will put this, once we are done, I will save the recording. And once I have it, I will forward it all to all of you and I'll tell you how to access it so that you can look at this again at a later time. I'm also creating little 10-minute snippets of each of these little parts. So if you need a review, you can go to specifically one column, multiple columns, or how to use the formulas. Okay.
Awesome.
So if you
Awesome.
need to go, thank you for being here. If you want to stay, I will continue with this.
Bye. Bye, everyone. Alex,
Bye.
thank you. Alex, you're a fantastic facilitator. I am so glad that you're on board with us. Thank you so much.
Oh,
He's
you're
here to make
welcome.
all our dreams come true.
You better believe it. This is awesome.
Yes.
I agree with
Bye,
Holly.
everyone.
Thank you. Bye, everyone.
Bye.
Thank you,
Bye.
everyone.
I'll stay on, Alex.
Okay.
Me too.
All right.
And I'll stay on too.
Okay.
Luke, I
wonderful.
have your goods here
Awesome.
in the
So-
secret drawer.
We're down to 2 cars in this household, so it's
Okay.
kind of rough.
It's okay. I have them saved for you.
All right, thanks.
So now that you're here, so let's do 2 more things then. The question was, does it only work with the last column? Could it be the first column? It absolutely could be the first column. But let's say that you're looking for students who all failed the first exam, right? So this is an example of how I can do like something in the middle. So let's add another rule. And in this rule, whoops, I selected everything, my apologies. So I want just to select all this, add another rule. I'm going to change this to A2 because that's where my data begins. I'm going to go to format if, custom formula. What do all formulas begin with?
Equal.
Equal sign. Yep. If you don't do it, it won't work. Okay. So equal. Now, what column is test one where the students failed?
D.
D. All right. And so I'm going to begin with $ D 2 because that's where the data begins. Equals. Now, this is very important. When we did the checkbox, we just typed in the word true because true is not a value, meaning it's not numerical and it's not text. It is a condition. So that's why we just wrote the word true. But now we're looking for specific text. So when you do specific text, we always begin with quotation marks. And in this case, I want the letter F. And then close quotation marks. And there it is. You see how everything got selected right there? Except these, because we know now that when I click done, where is this formula, where is this condition going to be?
At the end.
At the very end. So I click done. Here it is. I'm going to move it all the way to the top. And now you see, so that I can highlight the entire row. If the condition that I'm looking for could be at the very beginning, could be in the middle, could be at the end, it could be in any column whatsoever. As long as you tell it what you're looking for and what you want it to do, it'll do it. You just have to make sure. And if it doesn't work quite the way that you want, it's likely because it's out of order of what you want to accomplish. Okay?
Yes, thank you. I have another question. You're working in Google Sheets. Everything I have is in Excel. Does some of the rules transfer over? I mean, or...
And I can work with you specifically for Excel because even though Excel does exactly the same thing, everything that I've shown you works the same in Excel. It just does. The only difference is where things are located in the menus. That's really it.
And I think, I don't know, Google Sheets seems kind of easier than Excel in the sense that it looks more straightforward.
It's pretty straightforward. Excel is really powerful. I mean, it gave birth to Google Sheets, right? And they keep updating it and whatnot. And so it's older, it's wiser, it's more complicated. This is like, your millennial, my son is a millennial. He's like, just make it easier. Just make it easier. Why do you have to make things so hard? And so that's what I'm talking from my son speaking to me.
Actually, in the schools, that's the reason. I mean, it's just us oldies had to learn something new. And I work, Alex, I know you don't know me, but I work with people who are blind. So they have a certain, so Excel, JAWS reads, Excel formats. And JAWS is a reader. And I don't want to go and change all that. That's not something that I think is within my realm of kingdomship. So I can't go, we almost have to work in Excel just simply because that's how it gets read. And I've got like 16 sheets. I'm not shitting you. And they all have to be filled out on a monthly basis. So what I would like to do, if we could work together at your convenience, not mine, is just give me some ideas on how to do. It's almost all the same data. So it's not like I'm redoing or I'm putting different data in different spreadsheets. I'm just doing it for different people.
Sure. Yeah. Let's schedule a time after this meeting.
I would love that.
And let's get together and look over what you have and what you'd like to accomplish, and we'll figure it out. Because the truth is, anything you do in Excel, we can essentially copy and paste it and put it into Google Sheets if it's easier for you to do. So I just throw that tidbit out there for you as well, okay? Okay, so the last thing then that I'd like to cover is the duplicates, if you're all still on board with me.
I'm on board.
All right, let's do it. Okay, so I'm going to close out of here so I can fresh start. So I want to find the students who are duplicated, just like I showed you earlier when we first started with Vincent and, you know, those names and so forth, right? And the reason I might want to find duplicates is, let's say that this teacher, for example, wanted to give the students the opportunity to retake the test. And so maybe I want to see if they did better the second time that they did it or not, or whatever the case might be, but I want to find those duplicates, or maybe a student took it twice and they shouldn't have, whatever their reason might be. But you get the idea. I want to find duplicates in my data. So first things first, I'm going to select my column A, format, conditional formatting. Now you see that this automatically has a rule in it because it does, right? Because it applies to everything in here. So that's why that's going to pop up, is because we have a rule already being applied to this column from this being true. So I'm going to go ahead and click on another rule and change this to A2 to A1000, because again, I want to omit the first row because that's where my headers are. So I'm going to do A2. Next, I want to go to formula. Custom formula. Okay, you're gonna have to bear with me here as I explain how this works. This is called the count if formula, and this is a fantastic formula to use if you have tons and tons of data, because instead of going through and counting how many times does this thing occur, the count if formula that we can add to your spreadsheet anywhere. Now we're using it for a very specific reason, but it can count how many occurrences of this happen. How many times does this score show up? How many times does this name show up? How many times does this date show up? It's a very powerful tool, so it really will keep you from having to like really count stuff down, okay? Equals, count ifs. Now the S at the end is important because I'm doing multiple things. If I was just doing one thing, it would be fine, but I'm doing multiple things. So I'm the S at the end. So count ifs, parentheses. Okay, so here's where it gets a little complicated, but I will explain, I promise. So I do $, A, $2, colon, $, A. Okay, what does that mean? It means I want the range. So what I'm going to be telling Google Sheets to do is to look at this range of data. And all my data is located in column A2, right? Beginning in A2 all the way down to A1000. And I can just do, let's just do 100 for the sake of what we're doing right here, but it could be A1000. And so by putting the dollar signs right there, I'm sorry, $100. By putting the dollar signs right there, I'm fixing that table. I'm fixing that range. If I didn't have the dollar signs, when it looks for Marisol, for example, when it looks at Marisol, which is an A2, it'll look through the entire column, A2 to A100. But then if I didn't have the dollar sign and I go to Daniel, it'll shift the entire range to A4 to A104, meaning that if Daniel appeared in cell A2, he wouldn't be counted. Does that kind of make sense?
Maybe muddy.
Okay, I'll show you in just a second what that sounds like. Okay, what that looks like. And I'll show it to you in a very simple way for you to understand that. But let's finish this real quickly. So equals count ifs, $A2, and so forth, comma, A2, and the reason, and I promise I will explain this, A2, no dollar signs, because I want that value to keep changing. So I want the range to stay the same, but A2 should change to A3. Look at the next name, look at the next name, compare it to the entire row. Look at the next name, compare it to the entire row.
I get it. Okay.
Parentheses, does that kind of make sense?
Yes.
Okay, and so right now it's going to count everything, and then I'm going to put greater than 1 because I want the one to show up more than one time. What if you wanted to show more than 2 or 3 times? Then you put 2 or 3 right there. So then if I click done, Here they are. Lola shows up right here. Javon shows up right there. Let's change Javon's name to Bob. Okay, so you see this Javon is gone, but I know I added Bob at the very bottom, so that's why Bob is right down there. Okay.
It's easier in Excel.
Well, with Excel, right, it's the find duplicates, right? You just find duplicates, right? That's exactly it. Where it gets tricky in Excel is when you want to do like what we were doing with the travel, when you want to find exact matches.
I agree.
Yeah. So yeah, it's easier in Excel because Excel has it already built in because people know they want to do that. There's a way to do it easier here, but I just wanted to show you how those formulas kind of work in this realm as well. Okay.
Yes.
All right. So let me explain. So let me do this. 1, 2, 3. 1, 4, 5. Okay. Here's the difference between those two. Okay, so right here, what this is doing, this formula right here is you see is H51 to J51, no dollar signs, right? No dollar signs whatsoever. So what this is doing is adding up these 3 cells and giving us this total, correct?
Mm-hmm.
If I drag this down, basically what I'm doing is copying the formula down. I get 10 right here. And if I click here, you see it's H52 to J52. This means that since there are no dollar signs, this is a relative formula. It changes by location, right? It changes by location. But if I put my dollar signs here and I copy this down, it's still 6 because the dollar signs say, I want you to continue adding that specific row. So the dollar signs fix it. Without the dollar signs, it's free to move about the cabin, kind of a thing. So when we did it over here, we want the entire column to be fixed because that's where all our data is. But we wanted the second part to change as the names, as we go down the rows to compare it to the whole thing. Okay.
Give me another example to use that then, the dollar sign kind of formula, because I understand it with the names, but when you just did that adding, I'm trying to think of another use for that.
So, the basic use is when you're comparing one thing to another thing, right? And so what we wanted to do is if I wanted to find Daniel, right? I see that he's in column, or he's in row 4, right? He's in row A4.
Mm-hmm.
But I want to compare how often does Daniel show up in this entire range, correct?
I see.
So
Okay.
I want to select that and fix it, because when I add the formula here, it's going to compare it to this cell A2 and compare it to the whole thing. But when I move it down, I want the second part to change to A3, but I will still want it to compare it to the whole data set.
Okay.
So this is how I find my duplicates. Is this showing up more than once? But if I don't put the dollar signs, then the whole thing shifts down and I begin missing the top part.
Okay.
Well, that is what I had envisioned covering today. Do you have any questions?
I will. Once we start going through them, I know I'll have a lot of questions for you.
Okay, that's great. I'm
Yeah.
happy to do that. I'm happy to answer them. But I just wanted to show you what this could look like. And
It was a great overview.
Thank you. And like I said, I will break these down to like little 10-minute chunks where we do just 1 column, 2 columns, and then the formulas that we just covered at the very end so that you can focus in on the things that you want. But this
Okay.
entire video will also be available because there were questions that obviously came up that are not going to be included in that video.
Cool.
Okay.
Thank you so much, Alex. It really is nice being able to kind of just have you walk us through this process. And so
Yes.
I greatly appreciate it. And I look forward to the next one. So
Yeah.
thank you. Keep inviting us.
Yes.
Yes, keep
course, of
inviting
course.
us.
The
Bye,
next one,
everyone.
the next one
Bye.
will be in a week or two, and I'll let you know. Okay.
Okay, thank you.
Thank you so much, everyone.
Thanks, Alex.
Thank you. Take
And
care.
sorry I cussed.
It's quite
I
okay.
didn't, I don't remember it.
I said I dropped the S-bomb.
Oh,